All right. Hello and welcome to Cheat Code Radio episode number 23. The FTC won't leave me be because they will absolutely not let me escape from having to talk about this deal. But I will say I am pretty excited about this episode because the stuff that's been actually coming out of the ABK FTC lawsuit is actually stuff that's pretty interesting in terms of industry scope, and it's not just a bunch of lawyer jargon that I have to pretend I understand. So we've got that. We've got some game industry stuff to talk about, as well as the initiative reportedly just getting started with the development of Perfect Dark. But we've got a ton to talk about. And joining me, as always, is the man, the myth, the ranting, the intrepid Mr. Ivan Seiler.
Hey everybody. We're gonna do things a little differently today, but before we get started, remember, please hit that like button. Help us boost our engagement here. If you subscribe, if you haven't already subscribed before, please subscribe now. Share it on Twitter, YouTube, your pastor. Don't care. Get it out there. So.
Man said your pastor. I can tell you're from the South because you went from YouTube to Twitter to your pastor was your third default. Oh man. But yeah, so I as always, I kind of toss the FTC Microsoft stuff over to you. We got tons of interesting stuff. So where do you want to start with this? We got a ton of stuff that's been coming out of this lawsuit. We had a bunch of redacted stuff, and then we have unredacted stuff from everything from studios Microsoft wants to acquire to Sony's own deals to just about anything in between. So where do you want to start unpiling all this knowledge that we have learned over the past few days?
First off, I got to remind you guys, we are in the home stretch. I know it doesn't sound like we're in the home stretch, but we are in the home stretch. But guys, this is where it gets juicy. Like, we very rarely do we actually get to see anything from the game industry from behind closed doors. Some of this stuff is just wild. Like, you never realize how cutthroat people are. There's been a ton of things going on. I'm going to kind of view it chronologically, at least in terms of what we've learned in terms of the Microsoft itself before the acquisition streak, and then kind of going through that process. So one of the things that they talked about, and this is one of the little things that popped up recently, little things you should know about this hearing in particular, because it is very intriguing. We talked about this on last episode about who the judge is. This is Judge Corley. If that name sounds familiar, this is the same judge who is handling also the quote-unquote gamers lawsuit. For just getting you back up to speed of what's going on, the FTC granted, the Judge Corley did grant a temporary restraining order. Basically, it's a short-term deal just saying, hey, everybody sit tight. We're going to kind of sort some of this stuff out before we actually see we're going to grant a preliminary injunction. The difference between a temporary restraining order versus a preliminary injunction. Temporary restraining order is very short term. It's mostly about getting things to a hearing first. Normally lasts a couple of weeks, sometimes a month. A preliminary injunction can last up to like 3 years. So this is going to be a very interesting little bit here. So just a reminder of what the end game is. The FTC desperately wants this preliminary injunction. What they want is to be able to, if they can stop Microsoft legally, then this deal is dead, just across the board. Microsoft can't close on the deal if they've already been sued, and there's an actual legal backing saying if you close on this deal, that's illegal, and they can penalize you. Microsoft's not going to do that. Again, Nick and I aren't lawyers, so but we're very much laymen on this. I'm just basically putting my business law minor to work, so which I never thought I would actually use.
You heard it here first, folks. Ivan is putting minors to work.
Oh God.
Cheat Code Radio,
But,
made
yeah,
by kids for kids.
So this is kind of where we wanted to start. So let's all jump in a time machine and go back to the magical year of 2018. In 2018, we saw Bethesda put themselves up to market. Because if you remember, that E3 showing that they had for 2018, they announced a ton of stuff for no reason at all. They announced Starfield. They announced Elder Scrolls 6. Like a game that wasn't going to come out for another 10 years from what we've learned now. They announced a ton of stuff, just really upfront, threw everything at the wall, and it was a plea to get attention so that they would look more appealing to investors. So one of the things that came out of this whole deal, and actually this particular one came out today, and I want to talk about this one first, is Microsoft was in the market to buy. And they had people on their list of people they were interested in purchasing over the course of the last 5 years. Have you had a chance to take a look at this, Nick, in terms of the list? So I want to go through just a couple of these first. Let's take a look here. So there are some of the larger ones first, and then they had some of the smaller ones that kind of came out of this, like little prospects. So here's the list of the big ones in particular they were looking at. So the first one on this list of developers was they were looking at buying Bungie. As we know, Sony scooped them up instead. So we knew that they were contested between the two of them. We know that CD Projekt Red, which is also currently independent, was on the list. Certain Affinity who was independent, is on the list. Crytek, also on the list. 4A Games got scooped up by Embracer Group. Digital Extremes is owned by Leo Technologies. From Software was looked at being acquired. But the only thing with that was that we saw that Sony bought a minor share stake in that. So they did. You see like how things have kind of moved in the last 5 years or so. Gearbox got scooped up by Embracer Group. Hello Games is still on the table. IO Interactive, which actually I think you and I talked about this like a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So IO Interactive was in talks. Larian was in discussion. And by what we mean by in discussion is that we don't know if they've actually had meetings with them necessarily, or it was just a internal
discussion. Yeah, internal discussion amongst Microsoft going, hey, these guys would be cool.
Yep. So then we had People Can Fly, Remedy Entertainment, Starbreeze. Starbreeze is the guys who make
Payday.
Well, the larger group who make Payday. So, and Techland. Those are all the independent studios who were on the table for them. Then they had 4 publishers they were looking at. 505 Games, Focus Home Interactive, Paradox Interactive, and Sega. And so that's pretty interesting. So where are you on this, Nick? Did you think this was like a big deal for them, or did you think this was more along the lines of like, oh, these are just wish lists, or do you think they were like really serious about any of this stuff?
Well, see, the thing is like I saw that the slide that was kicking around about half an hour ago, where they had like a profile breakdown of like the pros and cons of buying IO Interactive, right?
Oh, I got that too. I got more after this.
So, see, for me, it's kind of like a no-brainer, and maybe they were in discussions with these companies, maybe they weren't, maybe this was a wish list, maybe this was an internal discussion of, pros and cons of picking up these developers, and whatever the case may be. But I didn't find anything particularly shocking about this list. When you talk about Larian, you're talking more Western RPGs, so, that's something Xbox has shown a lot of interest in growing on. IO Interactive isn't really that surprising. The publisher side of things is really interesting because for me, they went after everyone's always in this endless Square Enix, Capcom, Take-Two circle when it comes to PlayStation and Microsoft. just in like an endless loop of those are the publishers that people need to buy. But people forget about your 505 games, your Paradox Interactives, your Sega even. Now, like, I know there's a really hardcore base of Xbox guys that really want Sega, and they're all Dreamcast guys. And I get that. But Sega's like, it's really weird to me to see Sega actually on the list. That means they actually sat down and were like,
I'm
this
concerned
might be
about like
worth
the
it.
fact they didn't have Capcom on this list. Like Capcom would be the slam dunk, but maybe they thought like we could never get Capcom. It's not possible. Maybe that's what it was. But
I think there's more to it than that. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to flesh out their portfolio. And I think they're also based on this list is they're looking at studios. They're in studios and publishers. They're in like a growth phase. The thing is Capcom has exponentially grown. Like when you and me first started podcasting, everyone was talking about who's going to buy Capcom so they don't go bankrupt.
Yeah,
and now
we talking about Capcom used to be the the one turning tricks on the street corner. Like,
yeah, you want an exclusive? We'll make you an exclusive. You want an exclusive? And now they're releasing like I hate using the term, but it's banger after banger after banger for Capcom, and that market value is only skydiving up. So I can kind of see why that isn't on their hit list to a certain extent. Is they're not trying to find someone that's necessarily, massively doing a bunch of different things. They're trying to specifically flesh out their catalog. And considering how friendly Capcom's been with Game Pass, you don't really need to acquire them.
I mean, you get benefits. But it is interesting, this list. The first list that we showed was very interesting because you get to see some of this stuff may actually still come to fruition because you start seeing some of these deals they're still doing with people. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, they are working on Project Dragon. They do know they are doing something IO Interactive. But I think it's at this point, all the places that Microsoft has already acquired are talent that is proven, and they don't need to prove themselves anymore. And now this list are like people are like, we need to see if they're okay. Like one of the things I saw only one slide where they're talking about IO Interactive, and they did a breakdown of what makes them appealing and what the possible cons are. And so like they showed like the last 10 games they released, a couple different things here. But so like they said, what's the strategic rationale of this? They said like, 20 plus years, established AAA studio. They ship a game every 2 years. They're reliable. They have their own proprietary technology. They transform themselves into a gas developer. And they also would own Hitman. So that's important. Then they also talk about the risks. Like, hey, Square Enix has a minority stake in the company still. They have a repeated pattern of overextending their company size than downsizing. That's a little concerning. They said the company's not been able to ship a successful new original IP since Hitman and hasn't been able to repeat its success through its other games such as Kane and Lynch or Mini Ninjas. But then also, like, what's the reason? They even wrote down, reason behind Square Enix pulling away from IO is uncertain. Is the leadership at IO difficult to manage? It's like they were very realistic about this. And so that's I mean, you're a big you're a $1 trillion company. Like, you better be thorough.
Yeah, but I think the thing is like I feel like when the discussion comes to acquisitions, a lot of people just kind of fall into this whole thing of they're like, oh well, we have the money, so just buy them. A lot of people don't seem to think that there is a lot of strategy to these acquisitions. Like, these are meticulously picked through, and conversations are had like pretty handedly for a long time for the most part. The Blizzard Activision one's a little bit of a unique one because it just became an opportunity. They're like, hey, we can do this, and then they took it. But most of the
Yeah.
time, these acquisitions are deeply planned, and like you have to look at it from all angles. Like, just because a company's willing to sell doesn't mean their management is inclined to work with you in a productive way, or all these different factors. You got to look at what kind of deals that company has. Like you and me have talked about it before. Like Remedy, nobody's gonna buy Remedy because they've got like 10 years of publishing deals with Epic and Rockstar. See, your next 10 years of games from Remedy are going to be tied to other publishers.
Mm-hmm. And so like they actually had a list of like developers to watch as well. Mainly focusing on things like, hey, what games are they notable for? What do they bring to the table? So like this is stuff that they may do down the line. So I'll kind of breeze through these real quick for you. They looked at A44, which is the guys who did Ashen. Bonfire Studios, who was doing Project Torch. I have no idea what that is. Counterplay, who does Godfall. Uh, yeah, Dreamhaven, they don't have an announced thing. Ember Lab, the guys who did Kenna Bridge of Spirits. Face Punch, the guys who did Rust. Fat Shark, who did Vermintide 1 and 2. Ghost Ship Games, who did Deep Rock Galactic. Hazelight Studios, who did A Way Out and It Takes Two. Heart Machine, who did Solar Ash and Hyperlight Drifter. Hello Games from No Man's Sky. Moon Studios with Ori and Forsaken. Mundfish from Atomic Heart. Proletariat for Spellbreak. Striking Distance for Callisto Protocol. And Team Cherry for Hollow Knight.
Can we just dial back
So, I mean, that's interesting.
Like, we just unofficially confirmed that Godfall is, in fact, Game Pass fodder. Because they looked at acquiring them. But jokes aside from that, like, a lot of those studios make sense. It's wild to me to see Hello Games on there, though. Like, with, like, just the journey.
No, it's not wild. Think about it. They were able to they turned around their game, and they're able to make it successful. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's a live service benefit, where it's like, okay, I want to see, like, can you make this game successful? And also keep in mind, they had this list in place since 2018.
Yeah.
They were working on this. And so that was also when Sea of Thieves launched in a really poor state, like in terms of stuff to do, not technically necessarily, but it launched with not a plethora of things to do. And so having a studio that is able to turn things around is important. I think it's a valuable asset. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, you definitely need that kind of talent. And as games as a service is a fickle beast, but obviously it's a big piece of the pie because we're seeing so many companies reach into it. But there's companies that have been doing it really well for a long time, and then there's those that have adapted into it. You backpedal to IO Interactive. They managed to subtly make Hitman a games as a service without people realizing it was a games as a service.
mm-hmm.
And that in itself is kind of brilliant.
Yep. Oh, heads up. If I disappear, there's a big thunderstorm blowing through here. So just as a heads up, that's why.
I was just going to say that the FTC blocked you and then end the show.
All right. So there's a couple things I wanted to bring up. Let's see. So that was just kind of where Microsoft's headspace was for this whole little time frame. And so we got to see the Matt Booty email of legend. So here's the thing with that email. This email was first brought up by the Gamer lawsuit. So the Gamer lawsuit is just kind of like stuck in this eternal hell. Their first lawsuit was thrown out, and then they were able to appeal and then kind of restructure their case. They went for the preliminary injunction first with Judge Corley and failed. And the case, the thing they threw, I think it was in late May, they brought up this email from 2019 where Matt Booty was saying they were going to force Sony out of business. But the most of it was redacted to the point where you couldn't even see what they were really talking about.
What the context
they didn't
of that
say what it was.
basically.
Yeah, well, we got to see the unredacted version today, and that one was mostly about like, oh yeah, we're in this unique position where we could buy out all the competition. Like Microsoft has the money to buy up these other companies. He wasn't talking about Activision, he was just saying in general, like we could outbuy the content and force Sony out of business. That's what the conversation was. And I mean, the FTC actually opened with that, I believe, when they were going when they went after Matt Booty and for his testimony on Tuesday, Wednesday. I forget whichever day it was. Whenever they started the hearing, so they went after that, and it didn't really go anywhere. But it's a weird little practice for them. But it was worth noting because this is something they actually really tried to use, and it just didn't really go anywhere.
Well, I think the reason it didn't really go anywhere is like it's just such a generalized statement because yes, Microsoft is a $1 trillion company. They could legitimately buy up a lot of the independent studios if they wanted to. Legalities, aside, they could absolutely buy up the gaming industry if they tap into the whole plethora of money that Microsoft's sitting on. But realistically, that's not how Microsoft operates as a company. Mm-hmm. They don't just give the Xbox division all of the money.
Yep.
And I really think with emails like this, and I kind of chuckle because it's really telling when I see discourse around this of people who are not in company email chains or have never held a position in which you deal with corporate on a hand-to-hand level. Because, like, corporate talks endlessly about dusting competitors or, this customer's a pain in the ass or this supplier's, this or that. And it's really, really common. So I didn't really find these emails to be that damning. It really showed people's lack of education in terms of how business actually operates or how they communicate.
Yeah. No, so there were a couple things. I'll kind of skim over the testimony. Most of you guys have already heard about this. By the way, our gameplay's paused. So I know you guys have been sitting there looking at this one still image of Diablo 4.
I don't know what you're talking about. The gameplay's running right there. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
So one of the things that they kind of went through just generally, they did talk to Matt Booty. They talked to Sarah Bond. They had Pete Hines on there. And then the next day they had Phil Spencer, and I think it was the Stadia, like one of the Stadia heads. So it was like, okay, fine. Like apparently, so the Stadia thing, there wasn't anything of note that really came out during that. It was mostly just, all they really did was confirm that, cloud is very, very niche and it didn't really work. Like, okay, congratulations. You told us what we already knew. Good job. But in terms of the stuff, I'm just going to go mentally. Matt Booty just kind of said like, hey, we have a cordial relationship with PlayStation. I think they even asked him about his email, and he was like, oh, that was an old strategy we were thinking about doing, where we're like, oh yeah, we'll have exclusive titles and content, and we're not doing that anymore. That's it. And it was kind of like, okay. I don't know. Did you get a chance to listen to Sarah Bond's testimony at all?
I did a little bit, but I have to admit, I didn't really. I couldn't get that invested into it. I'll say that.
It was hard to really listening. If you've ever been to court before, it's not. It's not like an interesting thing to listen to. It's not at all like what they show on TV or anything like that. I mean, I've done jury.
It is not Law and Order by any means.
Yeah, no, it's very boring. It's setting precedent. It's setting a foundation for an argument later. It's really, really dull. Very rarely does it get to be super interesting. And when it does, it's few and far between. So if it gets really interesting, normally the judge shuts that down. It's supposed to be boring because you're building arguments. So Sarah Bond, look, I'm going to say if Judge Corley hasn't subscribed to Game Pass by this point, I'm going to be surprised. Like, she was charismatic as hell. Like, I'm going to be honest, she's probably going to be the next head of Xbox. I can't see anybody else taking that position, and just being able to go to a courtroom and be charismatic as hell and talk about your 76-year-old grandfather or your regular father loving Diablo 4 is just like the most random thing. And getting a judge to laugh about an elderly person playing Diablo. Like, okay, that's good charisma, and I think she's definitely going to be a good pick down the line. But we learned a lot of really interesting stuff. I think specifically from Pete Hines from Bethesda. I think that was really an interesting turn because we kind of got to see what the process was. And I'm not going to focus too much on like individual people. I'm really just going to focus on the stuff that we learned specifically. So just a couple of things that actually come out since we've been talking. We actually were able to find out how much Microsoft paid for Ninja Theory. They paid $117 million for Ninja Theory.
That's a damn steal.
I mean, isn't that just like a little bit cheaper than Insomniac?
Yeah, Insomniac was what,
200? Was it 120 maybe? 120 or 160?
Hold on. I will do a quick Google search.
Okay, you go do that. What else? I saw another thing here.
229 million for Insomniac games.
Oh, I'm way off. My bad. So there's actually a thing here from Phil. Here it is. Yeah. Where they were talking in September of 2021 about what they were going to do with Fallout 76. So they said they want to keep it where he said, quote, feels like we either need to see this thing getting to 10 million monthly users or decide to move on from it.
And clearly we know how that went.
See. Because then they announced in June of 2022 they had 12 million players. So, but yeah, I don't know what the current monthly active is, but yeah, these are just discussions. They don't really mean anything necessarily. It mostly is supposed to like point towards your headspace. Yeah, we're having a ton of stuff. So the reason why we're getting a bunch of news today is because they're giving the public versions of a lot of this evidence that came out, and we get to kind of see where, like, what everyone was talking about specifically. But I'll take a break for a minute. What stood out to you, Nick, about all this stuff? Like, what's some of the stuff that came out here that was interesting to you?
Just more of how, I don't know. You always think like when like I do a lot of like emailing back and forth and everything else. I deal with a lot of variety of different stuff in the industry I work in. But it feels really weird to see gaming execs have like casual emails. Like I don't know, like everyone comes across like super corporate in the gaming world, but seeing people like the email exchange between Phil Spencer and I think it was Matt Booty about PlayStation, like fanboy reviews from GameSpot and stuff like that was like, I'm like, oh my God, they actually like email back and forth about this stuff. Like they actually do talk about this stupid stuff that we like in the like overall online gaming community talk about. They're actually in tap with that stuff. Cause I always just assumed that like corporate gaming just did not pay attention to the nonsense.
Well, at least Microsoft does. I will say that much. Because remember, all these guys are on Twitter.
Yeah.
They're like they interact with people on a regular basis. They're going to see this stuff. Like, I mean, that was the only reason why I even got into YouTube in the first place. I made that stupid Hitler reacts to, I forgot what we were talking about. Oh, Gears of War. Microsoft buying Gears of War. And like I got responded to by Aaron Greenberg. And I was like, who is this? but like I didn't know who these people were. But no, like they do watch what community stuff does. Like they do care.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to watch it in emails though about like, oh, okay, it's interesting, fine.
Um,
So
the interesting one today was the whole Microsoft sacrificing Xbox Series X sales for their ambitions in the cloud,
mhm.
and that they balanced more chips for cloud play than console. And I kind of wonder if they're regretting that decision.
I mean maybe.
Like that's the stuff. Like, see, my problem is the stuff that I'm finding interesting doesn't have answers to it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we decided to do this. I'm like, well, how do you feel about that now?
Yeah. It's a good
Um,
point.
and that's the thing. Is like you're seeing like a lot of this stuff that we're seeing is emails and conversations that were had a couple of years ago. So we already know the outcomes. So it's like I'm interested in like, well, how do you feel that decision rolled out for you in the long run?
Hmm.
I thought the Pete Hines conversation was really interesting. I mean, that's where we got the Indiana Jones tidbit and everything else.
Yeah. So let's talk about Indiana Jones for a minute. So it was funny because that first day of testimony was kind of like in a way it was kind of like a second Xbox conference where it was more just like confirmation about stuff being exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And like the thing about it too is that it wasn't like there was no corporate spin to anything because they can't. It's a court case. They're under oath. Like you're getting the raw answer, no questions asked, no spin. This is what it is. Like they asked, "Oh, is Starfield going to come to PS5?" No. Like don't ask. It's not. And it's like that killed the absolute hype for that for the PlayStation guys entirely. Um, and so the big one we talk about this now was Indiana Jones. They confirmed that not only did they get it to renegotiate, but they got it to be exclusive because, and they brought up the point saying like, "Oh, how'd you do that?" It's like, well, we negotiated with Disney to get Indiana Jones on multiple platforms just so we could make the game, and then we got bought out by we got bought out by Microsoft. So now we went back to the table and renegotiated. And I guarantee you, not only did they change the uh, the money, like I said, they didn't know. Sorry, I thought I was hearing something else, but I said no. They not only did they change the consoles, but I bet you they got a better percentage because
Mm-hmm.
they have actual bargaining power with Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And so actually, this is a little tidbit that's going around right now, and like this is the part I'm actually the most interested in, is apparently Todd Howard's been working on an Indiana Jones game for the last 10 years. Like at least in terms of a pitch and a story and the rest of that. And I'm like, that would be cool. And apparently he's been pitching it around to people, and it's been really well received to the point where they're like, hey, everyone who hears it is like super stoked and they want to play this game. And I'm kind of like, that's pretty rad. Like and so I even talked with a couple of guys in our Sanctuary Discord about it, and we were like, what would be a good Indiana Jones game? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
So like right off the top of your head, Nick, but what do you think a good Indiana Jones game would look like? Like timeline, location, whatever.
Okay, so my first thing is absolutely I need a video of Todd Howard going. You see that treasure over there? You can touch it. But no, so Indiana Jones is this really weird thing because I actually played the old games.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which one it was. I had it on PC. I want to say it was the Temple of Doom. I can't remember which one it was. But mechanically, it was kind of like Tomb Raider, but what separated it out was the whip mechanic. The whip mechanic was so cool because, like, you're Indiana Jones. You don't have an assault rifle and all this nonsense. You had the revolver and you had the whip. so you could disarm people with the whip and then shoot them. And it was this great like wombo combo of being able to like use the whip, use the gun. Hand to hand was great and crunchy. So like there's part of me that's like, yeah, you could do like a Tomb Raider style or Uncharted style Indiana Jones, and that would be kind of interesting. Make it cinematic, set it in the traditional World War II era if you want, and like that's kind of like the generic, stereotypical way. But like for me, it's like, nah, man, I want that in first person. I want Indiana Jones in first person. And I want the combat to be the focus. Like I want that like when you punch somebody you feel the crunch. Like and like when you hit somebody with that whip, like it's crisp and like I want a first person Indiana Jones action game only for the reasons the one thing I hate about third person adventure games is the over reliance on puzzles. I don't mind puzzles in first person. And for like treasure raiding and everything else, first person would be great. So for me, I want like a first person game. I want there to be combat and a blend of puzzles, and I just want that to be an equal balance. Because like the problem with the old Indiana Jones games is there was a lot of puzzles to them, and the combat was so good. You sat there through the puzzles going, man, I wish I could go punch a Nazi right now. But I also don't want them to be like the Wolfenstein games where all you're doing is, hatcheting Nazis. Like, having some puzzles in there would be cool, too. Like, it's balancing that action movie style with also what a stereotypical adventure game would have.
Yeah.
What about you, though?
See, I could see it being first person or third person. I kind of lean towards third person. And the only reason I lean more towards third person is because you are relying on melee combat for most of it. I feel like you need to have more situational awareness in that case. And so that's why I lean more towards third person. But I mean, look, Machine Games is good at what they do. Like a first person game would be perfectly fine. But I actually went as far as to like come up with lore and shit. Mandalore.
I'm just gonna call you the Mandalorian at this point.
Oh God, no, Mandalorian. So I bounced around a couple ideas. I got 3 ideas. I got one really good idea, one idea that could work and be serviceable, and another one that will be really good gameplay wise. So so I really wanted to focus more on items in particular that really do exist, that have some sort of mystical connection to it and are preferably lost. So the first one that kind of like, this would be a serviceable game, and I thought it was like okay. Like, not my number one choice, but would be fine. So there's something called the Fairy Flag of Dunvegan, which is in Scotland. It's basically just the story behind it is like some Norse guy came over, went into Scotland, or will become Scotland, had his clan there. Supposedly he married a fairy woman, and they had a kid together. And she gave the kid this blanket, which turned into like a flag for their clan. And the flag supposedly, that if it's flown, will give them 3 guaranteed wins. And they've used it twice. And supposedly, in World War II, they offered to let the British have the flag to defend the cliffs of Dover if the Nazis were to invade. And so I was thinking, because the idea is that there's the Anaswaran or something like that, which is like this group of Nazis, and they were really obsessed with supernatural stuff. And so it very realistically could have been the Nazis were looking for things that would guarantee them a win. or would prevent a win from somebody else.
Mm.
And so if they were planning on trying to invade England at one point, so it would say, hey, we got rid of that, so they can't stop us.
Mm.
I was like, that'd be an idea. That'd be fun. Although personally, I don't think that would work for them because I think it would be kind of boring. Like, because you're going to England, and like, when you think Indiana Jones, you want to go to foreign lands, unexplained temples and stuff like that. Like, so gameplay wise, not sure. Story wise, it could work. Especially as a first game in like a trilogy or something. So there's that. I think story wise, this has to be after Raiders, and it could be before or after Temple of Doom. But the thing about Indiana Jones is that really any time between Raiders and Last Crusade, you can do whatever you want. Like, they're all episodic. It doesn't even matter. Like, it doesn't have to build on each other. It just doesn't have to. So I think there's a lot of potential there in terms of what they can do. So the other one I thought was the Masamune blade. So you could see Indiana Jones go to Japan or Korea or China.
Mm.
Somewhere in that right thing. The Masamune blade is I apologize I mispronounced it, but I'm just going based off of memory. It's a special blade that's like extremely sharp, and like the craftsmanship is just extremely well done. And supposedly there's a curse behind it that if you unsheath the blade, someone has to die. Either you're gonna die or someone in the room's gonna die with you. So like it's a little cursed item. I'm not sure how it works story wise, but imagine you could be Indiana Jones and you're going to Japan. You could go to Tibet. You can go to China. Like, there's a bunch of opportunities there. Like, it gets you out and about and going somewhere different. And you could have a mixture of enemies between Nazis and the Japanese or whatever temple you're raiding. So you have a lot of potential. But I have one idea I thought would be perfect. Because this particular thing does exist, and you can make so many little references to it. Nick, have you heard of the Ring of Senicianus?
No.
So the Ring of Senicianus, this is spelled Senicianus. It is a ring that was discovered in the 1700s. It's 12 grams of just gold. But the thing about it is this ring is bigger than most rings. It doesn't fit on your finger. It has to be fit over a glove. So the legend behind it, and I'll read this verbatim. So there is a peculiar design with a Latin inscription around the ring of it. It says, Senicianus, live well in God. So a few decades after this discovery, it was on an ancient Roman tablet that they found with it. This tablet was written by a Roman man named Silvanus, informing the god Nodens that the ring was stolen. The inscription says, among those who bear the name of Senicianus, to none grant health until he brings back the ring to the temple of Nodens. So the idea is that whoever has this ring, if their name is Senicianus, that they would have a great treasure they would find from this ring, that they would inherit from it, and they would have this ability. So this is the way the game opens in my mind. I imagine you see Indiana Jones like tied to a chair getting the shit beat out of him. He's in like this long corridor. There's boxes upon boxes to either side. You notice that there's an overhead light and it's swinging left and right slowly. And a guard comes up to him and punches him in the face, and the other guards like turn around and move away. And the guy punches him, and in a moment, Indy's able to kind of break free and grab and like knock the guard out with his head, unlock himself, and then he's free. He goes into the corridor, opens the gate, and he's on a train in the middle of the night. And that'd be your tutorial segment. Eventually, he breaks free and is able to go, and so he's like, "Oh, I got a lead on this ring." He goes to Oxford, England. He knocks frantically in the middle of the night on an apartment door. A man opens. He's like, "JR, open the door. I need your help." And he's like, "Indy, what do you need?" And so he guys sits him down. And it's like, "JR, I need to know about this ring. What do you know about the ring?" And he talks to him about a little bit. And he says "Oh, I need your help on this." He's like, "I don't know. I can't really help you on this. I can't really leave. Like, I'm working on a project right now." And it's like, "Oh, okay. Well, what about CS? Could CS come?" And he's like, "Nah, can't. CS is probably busy doing something else, teaching or whatever." It's like, okay. And so he's like, "Thanks for the help." And he steals his notes and goes away. And he walks away, and you see a note on the door, and it says, "J.R.R. Tolkien" on the side. Because in reality, this ring, it was the inspiration for Lord of the Rings.
Jesus
I know you can't take it. But because it's a ring, you could go anywhere with it. You could do anything. You could go to Norway, you go to Italy, you go anywhere you want. Because it's Roman. The Romans were everywhere. It gets you to faraway lands, and you're not tied to a specific geographic location. It's interesting. It's lost, and you could tie it in and say, "Oh, well, the Nazis were strapped for cash by the end of the war. They needed money. They needed gold to find." Like, you could work with that. I was like, that would be so cool. And then you could tie it into Lord of the Rings. There's like a tiny little Easter egg, but like have fun stuff like that. I'd be sold. I'd love it.
Ain't no way anybody's paying Embracer Group the money to have to put that one little Easter egg in there. Embracer's so strapped for cash, they'd be like, "Oh, you want to mention Lord of the Rings? 50 million."
They'd probably do it for free. Free. Actually, no, you wouldn't have to actually. You can reference other things. You can reference people. Because Tolkien is a public figure. You could do it for free. Now, you couldn't show like Lord of the Rings or anything, but you can make it like really apparent.
I don't even have words for you right now.
Hey, Todd Howard, if you're listening, you got that one for free. I mean, you get anything you want for free from me, but
okay.
do what you want.
Okay. See, now I need to get you and Todd Howard to sit down and talk about your theories for an Indiana Jones game, because apparently that's something that needed to happen. I saw a great question. I think it was Steve from the Season Gaming tweeted about it. He's like, "Why is it when everyone sits down with Todd Howard, all they do is ask him about Elder Scrolls and Starfield? Like, what's this man's favorite sandwich? Like, why isn't anyone asking Todd the important questions?" And I sat there, I was like, man, Todd Howard's gotta love a good Reuben.
Man, he's a Reuben bro, man. We all know that.
I feel like I'm gonna like Jez with the beans is me with Reuben sandwiches. Like, I'm gonna show up to Summer Games Fest next year with a briefcase full of Reubens.
No, they won't let you bring that like across the border though. That's the thing. I'll show up the sauerkraut, you show up with the corned beef, and we're good.
All right. Oh man, I don't think they'll let me bring my meat across the board. Never mind. Never mind.
Frodo's looking at me like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
All right, back on track, because like the FTC, we are off the rails at this point.
All right.
Was there any other?
We should talk about the price increase before we forget, because apparently everybody forgot too.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Xbox is doing a price increase.
Yeah.
I know it's not really a part of the hearing, but I feel like we should mention it because it is important.
So here's the thing: the Game Pass price increase, I'm fine with.
Negligible. It's $1. or
Yeah, like
$2.
my Xbox Game Pass Ultimate's going up $2. It's like whatever. PlayStation Plus went up. Xbox Live Gold has gone up over the years. Like subscription services go up. At least they're not doing like Netflix and increasing it by like $8 or whatever ludicrous amounts, and only one
I mean,
person.
normally Netflix, well, they normally go up like $1. Then sometimes they get a little full of themselves and they jump up like $3, and it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. So like it's fine. Do you like increase your subscription by $2? It's an extra $24 out of me a year. I really don't care. I use the service a bunch on my PC, my Xbox. I need gold, so it's like it's whatever.
Yeah.
However, Xbox can absolutely get the same smoke that I gave PlayStation with the console increase because for the love of God, Americans should have to pay more like the rest of us.
No, that's what we fought for our independence for. No taxation without representation.
No, screw you guys. I'm gonna start. You know what? I'm gonna start hucking PS5s and Xbox Series X's into the freaking bay. I'm gonna go into Boston and just start hucking consoles into the lake until you guys have to pay the same as the rest of us. So like that's a minor complaint aside. Like I understand it. Like legitimately, you have to coddle the American market because you guys are crybabies if you have to pay more for something. But my biggest problem with it is we are hitting mid-generation. Like we're 3 years into this now. This is typically when you start seeing the holiday, $100 off your Xbox Series X, or here's $50 off your PS5, or et cetera, right? This is when we start seeing the price decreases. We're increasing the price. They're like, nah, you can pay more for it. And like, I'm sorry, there's no way that PlayStation and Xbox aren't making money off of these consoles now. And they're just making more money off of these consoles now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my problem with it. And it's hilarious to me because I see all these people on Twitter going, I can't wait for the PS5 Pro. I'm like, I hope you got your mortgage payment ready. They just jacked up the main console, and you think the Pro's going to be affordable? Oh, it's going to do 4K 120 FPS. We've been here, guys.
Dude, speaking of prices, though, apparently, one of the things that came out was about Sony's Project Q. Microsoft did a analysis, and they have a price estimate of what they think it's going to be. Again, we could be surprised by it. Like, let's make that abundantly clear. But I mean, typically with these groups, I mean, the surprise is about how much of the profit margin they're willing to have or eat. So I mean, that's the major part about all of this, really. But what's interesting about this is that Microsoft estimates it's going to be like just under $300 for Project Q. And I'm like, a dedicated streaming tablet I can't take with me that I have to have attached to my PS5 for $300? I mean, I could buy an Xbox Series S or even a Switch. Like, why would I?
Don't you have a phone?
Good point. Very good point. I mean, it has the same battery life. So.
Like this is my general problem with the whole price increase anyway. Like it's been buried in the news cycle, and like for the most part I think they did like this price increase. Like I understand inflation, I understand the economics behind this, but like you look at PlayStation and Xbox's quarterly numbers and tell me that they need to increase the price of their consoles. They don't. But they know enough people have bought their consoles that most people aren't going to care. Enough of the vocal gaming minority has already bought their PS5s and their Xbox Series consoles. So they're going to jack the price up $50. People are going to go into the store to buy a PS5 or an Xbox, and they're going to go, oh, it's $649 now. Or whatever the price is. USD is the same, but whatever the price is in your locale, it's $50 higher. And people are just going to go, okay, well, I want it, so, and pay it. But it's increasingly frustrating to me that they have figured out a way to fleece more money out of people for the consoles. And people are just like sitting there smiling, going, give me more. Give me more. Like, yeah, it's gross to me. It really is. Like, there's no defense for $1 trillion company increasing the price on their console, and there is no defense of Sony increasing the price on their console. They're making more money. They're just trying to fleece you for more, and they know they've got a whole army of internet nerds that will go to war for them to justify it.
Yep. Yeah, so there's a couple things I wanted to bring up as well. So this is the part. Let's talk about Sony for a minute in terms of what we learned from this particular hearing. So we had one particular bombshell or email that came out, and maybe you want to take point for this, but this particular one was from Jim Ryan. So as you guys know, Jim Ryan has been very vocal about how bad this deal is. Like, we might not survive the console war, or not war. We have to start this console generation without Call of Duty. This is unbelievable. We can't this is the revenue. We rely on the revenue so much for this to happen. What else? He said some crazy stuff over the last year. There was another one I had in mind, but I can't remember what it is. By the way, so we had this email that came out specifically where he was talking to his bosses, and he was very clear with them, like, "Oh yeah, we talked to Phil, we talked to Bobby Kotick, and like, yeah, there's no fear whatsoever in us losing Call of Duty. Now we're good." Like, we're abundantly clear. Like, this is like the day after the deal was announced. It was very early on. He's like, "Yeah, we're not gonna lose Call of Duty. We're good. We're fine." This is not about exclusives. It's about getting more money and more revenue, and so it'll probably benefit us in the long term too. But I think that's it. And then, like, right afterwards, starts going around and trying to get the deal blocked. And
yeah,
it's like, okay.
Yeah, but I think I don't want to be the Jim Ryan defender because like this, like I can't believe I have to go this guy's defense. I get it to a certain extent. You've got to keep shareholders like, hey, we're fine. We can do everything. We'll figure this out. No matter what, we're going to figure this out, right? And as a leader, you've got to show confidence in what you can do. It was kind of like, remember the digs people were taking when Jim Ryan came out and said that they couldn't create something that could rival Call of Duty or something, or somebody came out and said, I think that was Jim Ryan, that they couldn't create something in-house as high quality as Call of Duty or something along those lines. Yeah. And people are like, well, imagine how Naughty Dog feels when you're out there saying that they couldn't make something as good as Call of Duty. What you're seeing is the opposite of that, where internally they're going, hey, we will be okay because we will figure this out. We have always figured it out, and we will continue to figure it out. And to be brutally honest, as a competitor, it's always in Jim Ryan and Sony's interests to block this deal under any ludicrous measures that they can. I wouldn't hold that against them because, like, I don't understand where people necessarily thought that everyone was just going to roll over and let this deal happen with the sheer size of it.
You know, and also, like, it's another asset to them because one of the things we did find out, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the way if I recall this correctly, one of the things that happened, and this is one of the things that Phil testified about, Sony had been in the habit of fucking around and finding out lately. So for sake of putting it out there, they were going around and buying Bethesda exclusives, which was unheard of. Bethesda never did exclusives before like that, like as a part of like a deal. So that was like really surprising. But Sony was out there doing that, and they got Deathloop and they got Ghostwire Tokyo, and they tried to get Starfield, and because of that, according to Phil, that's why they went to go buy Bethesda, because Sony was trying to do that. And so because you messed you effed around, you found out. Like, so that's one thing. But then also not even just talking about just Bethesda, but and this is the part I'm more concerned if I get this the timeline right. But my understanding is that Sony approached Activision about a better deal for them. So what we found out from the FTC, who threw this out here, the FTC was just really careless. They gave us way too much information and confirmed like figures I've been throwing around for years. You've heard me, Nick. I know you've heard me talk about this like a dozen times about like, oh yeah, for every game that's sold, depending on the platform and if it's digital or physical or whatever, the percentages that you get back are different. Mm-hmm. So like, oh, if you sell a game through GameStop, they get like 10% of the sale, and then the platform holder gets 20% of the sale, and then the publisher may get the rest of it, but then they maybe internally they split it up between the developer, or just depends on what the who's what and how the deal is done. And so I'd always thrown around like 30%. I was like, but if it's digital, like Xbox gets if they're the person for their own games, like they're gonna get like a 30% cut. And apparently 30% is the actual standard amount. Microsoft had been offering like 80-20 to people for a while, but apparently what Sony had done is they approached Activision about giving Activision like an 80-20 cut, as opposed to the 70-30 they've been doing. And Activision approached Microsoft and was like, hey, Sony's offered us this. If you don't match it, game's exclusive. And so it was like, okay, now we're forced to do this. So, I mean, Sony had been doing this for a while. They were using Activision as a pawn to play games like they've been doing with everybody else. I mean, so like they've been using Square Enix for the last 4 years. Like, oh yeah, definitely. Final Fantasy is not a permanent exclusive. And it's like, all right, well, what games are coming, what games aren't coming, and it creates uncertainty, which is what people want to hear. Like, it's like, oh yeah, it's uncertain for Xbox, so you should stay with PlayStation because you'll get this. So it's a weird thing. I mean, like Sony, they made these plans, they threw it out here, and so like for them, like yeah, they definitely want to stop this deal if they can because it's still another option for them to create a little more discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the thing is too is I think Activision was definitely taking advantage of the being able to leverage an 80-20 because they have Call of Duty. They can leverage whatever the hell they want out of PlayStation or Microsoft just because of how much money Call of Duty brings in. And like, keep it a buck. Like people really underestimate how cutthroat the gaming industry really is. Like, I think this lawsuit has done a lot in terms of educational purpose to how cutthroat this industry is in terms of what developers and publishers are willing to do in order to get their games where they need to or make the money, to get things done. Like, whether it's getting funding for development of the game, getting assistance in creating the game, or wherever the case may be, it's not just about exclusivity. It's about what can you give me? Can you give me a better percentage? Can you provide developers to help me? Can you, et cetera, et cetera? Like, it's no longer just, hey, we'll exclusively market you on our box. It's, hey, you need to have a background in order to support and give us what we need to succeed. And the more valuable your IP is, the more you can leverage out of PlayStation and Microsoft and everything else. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that's what we're seeing with Square Enix is like Square Enix is leveraging the hell out of Sony because PlayStation knows that Square Enix makes games that appeal to their audience. So PlayStation will continue to leverage those games, and Square Enix will continue to leverage funds out of Sony to create those games. I'm just curious to when Sony goes, okay, enough's enough. You'll put your game on PlayStation or it won't be successful. Because Square Enix seems aggressive as hell. Like some of the stuff that's come out about Final Fantasy 16, about, oh, we shopped it around and et cetera, et cetera. Like, it comes across like Square is going to people and going, pay for our game. And
Yeah.
PlayStation's like, well, we have a market for your game, so we will do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to hit a line at some point, and I'm just wondering when that line will appear.
Yeah. Speaking of which, before I forget, we actually got the schedule for tomorrow.
Oh God.
So Jim Ryan's video deposition will be there. Jeff Fisher from NVIDIA, Phil Eisler from NVIDIA, both of them have video depositions. Then Dr. Robin Lee, who's an FTC economic expert. Then Dr. Elizabeth Bailey, who's a Microsoft economic expert. And then Laura Wright, who's a part of Xbox, it will be there as well. So
I want to know how you become a Microsoft economic expert. Stonks go up. The end.
I actually did a little stuff. I have a minor in business law, and I'm just kind of like, all right, I never thought I'd have to use this. So one of the things that's coming out about all of this is whether or not Jim Ryan's video deposition is going to be sealed or not. For those of you that aren't sure, sealing documents, it can be used in criminal or civil court cases. This is going to be civil, technically. Wow, I'm not even sure, really, honestly, with this. I'm really rusty. But one of the things is that's going to come up with this is that whether or not the video deposition is going to be entirely sealed or not. I don't know if this is going to be redacted. Like, we may get a public version that's redacted that we can see. It'll probably just be a transcript, honestly, if anything. They may show that, or maybe the whole thing might be sealed. So there's something called non-depository or dispository, and then there's dispository sealing. So hopefully I remember this correctly. So non-dispository is like, hey, I had this testimony, and like there's some information in here that doesn't really have anything to do with the case, but would be like, I'd rather it not get out. So like, for example, let's say, I'm going to use Jim Ryan as an example because that's what we're talking about in this case. So Jim Ryan does his thing. It's like, oh yeah, so yeah, we sell a lot of games. So the thing is, Call of Duty sells routinely like 10 million copies on our platform, as opposed to God of War, which sold like in the same time frame only like 6 million. I'm just throwing out figures here. I'm not backing them up. Or like Spider-Man sells 5 million. But like little things like that aren't like relevant to the case necessarily. All it really says is just that Call of Duty sells a lot more than their first party games. So that would be non-dispository because it doesn't really matter towards the case itself about why Microsoft shouldn't buy Activision. So they would say, okay, we'll redact that portion of it because it's not really relevant to this. All it does is establishes that Call of Duty sells more. But then there's something that is like dispository, where it's like, this is actually extremely relevant to the case, but if this news got out, it would be really, really bad. For example, I'm just throwing out a random example as off the top of my head. If Jim Ryan were to come out and say, like, guys, without Call of Duty, we are boned. We got nothing. We can't afford to do anything. The budgets we actually spend on advertising and marketing and our actual development of our own first party games, which take 5+ years to come out, like all of that for all the salaries and everything else is so expensive. The only way we could actually even fund those is by using the revenue we get from Call of Duty. We have no choice. We have to have Call of Duty. And so, because if that news got out, share prices drop. It's bad. It makes Sony look extremely weak and that they're not able to do anything. So that would be information that's like not good to Sony, but it's important to the case, so that would be considered dispository. And so they might seal the documents there so the judge knows that. And some of the attorneys do, but Microsoft wouldn't know about it. So it'll be interesting to see what we actually get to see tomorrow for that. I don't know if there's going to be anything where they would just admit outright, like, hey, the model we have is actually extremely unsustainable. We're living on the razor's edge here. Like, if we lost this, we're screwed. I don't know if they would come out and say that necessarily, but they would say, like, oh, it's important. But since this is a court case, they're going to demand they give actual details to, like, back up their claim. But again, because this is a video deposition, like, it's not like they can go get more information from him or press him for anything. So, fine.
It seems really weird that after all the different testimony he's given, that he's doing a video deposition.
Yeah. It's weird because apparently, like, someone actually found out he's actually in town. He's like 20 minutes away. If he wanted to, he could go. But he's choosing not to.
I don't want to be that guy, but I'm wondering if it's an actual thought out move, because like he's proven time and time again when when he's allowed to toe a line, he's great, but when he goes off the books, he always says something quotable that gets him in trouble.
Yep. Like, oh, we have to protect our children from having access to it was an interconsole play. We have to protect them in our special garden. It's like, what?
Yeah, he doesn't do off the record talk well. So keeping it to a video deposition might be in the best interest of what they want to achieve. So I think that's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that's a really smart play on Sony's book to do it that way.
And also, you can't press them for more information after the fact.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the NVIDIA people on there. So we'll see how that goes. So
yeah. Well, with all the GeForce Now partnerships and everything else, I'd imagine the NVIDIA stuff should be fairly straightforward.
Well, they got 2 people from NVIDIA, which is interesting. So I don't know how that's going to fly. So
yeah, it'll be interesting.
We'll see. But yeah, I mean, the market's very confident that Microsoft's going to win this. So timeline. So we got tomorrow. They're doing day 3. I think they said they're willing to go out until Thursday for the last day, and then the judge is going to make a decision. Could make a decision on Friday potentially or Monday. Just depends.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see, because the 4th of July next weekend. So not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. So we'll see. So, what else do we talk about? Oh yeah, we got more information about Perfect Dark.
Yeah, we did.
Nick, why don't you take the reins on this one?
All right, hold on. I didn't realize we were doing that one next, so hold on. I want to make sure, because this was a really well done piece. So this is done by IGN and Rebecca Valentine, who does a lot of their more investigative pieces. And
Perfect Dark reboot is still years.
Damn autoplay ads. So basically, she talked with over 13 people. And I really appreciate this level of clarity. It's not like I talked to a person or I talked to 2 people. It's like you talked to 13 different people who all had knowledge of what was going on. Why they revealed with a CGI trailer. The studio's history, how it's been, everything was ballooning at the time. This was their created studio. It was led by Daryl Gallagher, and I'm trying to read all this in quick time. This was supposed to be the quadruple A game developer, which was probably some hiring guy's brilliant idea for a LinkedIn job listing that has haunted this studio forever. The big thing is when a lot of us saw the initiative formed, a lot of us were excited about the prospect of new IP. It was a time when Microsoft didn't have a whole heck of a lot going on. So the idea of a new studio doing something new was really exciting. Then we learned they were doing Perfect Dark. And you remember, Ivan, when that first came out, they were doing Perfect Dark. It was said it was going to be a warm-up project for the studio. They were going to crank out a Perfect Dark game and then get to work on that new IP. And so apparently that's not how it happened. So in the early days of the project, the overall mood was optimistic. Perfect Dark was an exciting IP that most were thrilled to be working on. First at the initiative and then at certain Affinity when the studio signed onto the project in 2019. As with an earlier development process, much of the internal work consisted of nailing down a clear creative vision for what the game was consist of, and then developing a core gameplay loop that is both supportive of that vision and fun for the player. Studio leadership was fairly clear early on that the initiative Perfect Dark would see a balance of combat and espionage elements that would ideally feel like playing through a James Bond Mission Impossible film. But while these core ideas remained roughly consistent throughout Perfect Dark's development, exactly what the player would be doing to express them kept changing as ideas were pitched, prototyped, and then scrapped for something completely different over and over and over again. This process was expected at first as a fairly normal component of game development, but as Perfect Dark moved into its second and third year, sources tell us that this process began to drag on much longer than expected as leadership's refusal to commit to any specific ideas or shape for the game began to frustrate both the initiative teams and certain Affinity. One former employee, a woman, also expressed frustration both with the low number of female creative staff on the project generally during this time, as well as multiple meetings where male creative heads made insensitive suggestions that were difficult to push back on without more women in the room to support potential concerns. An Xbox spokesperson offered the following response to this specific topic. We are committed to addressing any and all concerns employees have in accordance with our company policies with the HR. Among even more former employees we spoke to was a sense that people in charge were unable to communicate a clear vision of the game they had so enthusiastically signed up to make, or some said when they did manage to communicate that vision, leadership ignored or dismissed feedback from the experienced team they had put together. These repeated struggles over creative vision resulted, sources say, in a build after build being thrown out and internal frustration growing with each new reset. It was not that we didn't know what we wanted, it was that we kept making things that weren't what we wanted, said one of the initiative developers. We do it over and over and over again. The levels we had when I left weren't the same ones we had 3 months prior or 3 months prior to that. I don't know why people just keep hitting the reset button. That was definitely contributing to the feeling that we weren't making any progress. People kept starting over. So I'm gonna incline people to go ahead and read. This is a very lengthy report, and even to shorten it would be a disservice to the level of work that was put into it. So just go and read it. But the basic sense from what I got is that they had far too many highly creative people in the room, and nobody could settle on an idea and just work as a cohesive team to get things rolling. And I know, Ivan, you and me had this conversation when we went through that 8-month period. Remember, it was like, oh, somebody that was a lead at Rockstar joined the initiative. Oh, someone from Sony Santa Monica joined Rockstar that was a lead. And you and me had the conversation about when you have a bunch of people that lead teams and you don't have any like root core workers, you run into creative difference issues a lot.
Yeah.
Like, not to pull out a probably racially insensitive term these days, but it falls under the too many chiefs, too few Indians moniker, if you will. Is there's too much leadership and not enough people that are like, yes, I can do that. Don't look at me in that tone of voice. It's an old one, I know, but
I would have done too many cooks in the kitchen, but okay.
But with that being said, is when you have that many creative people, I think there needs to be a balance within a studio. And I just feel like the initiative doesn't have that balance. You need to have a balance of like 7 people that go, hey, this would be a really cool idea. And then you go, yeah, that's a really cool idea. And then you have people that go, hey, I know how to do that cool idea. And I think that's what the initiative seems to be struggling with.
I'm trying to be polite here. I'm going to be real. Fuck them. I am very adamant about I want to see production. There are studios that were assembled and put out projects before these people. One great example was Black Tusk, so which became the Coalition. So they were assembled like in 2013. I want to say 20 like they over the period of like I think it was 2012. They were like going through this process of like just buying up as many people as possible and like getting all these people from different projects, and then eventually, uh, 20 2013, I think they officially announced, and we got that little teaser in 2014 for them. And then they dropped Gears 6. Sorry, not Gears 6. They dropped Gears 4. Oh, so no, I'm sorry. No, I'm wrong about that too. They dropped initially the Gears of War remaster. And I think that was 16? Is that right? So let me just double check that. – 2015, actually. Yeah, it came out 2015. So they pumped out a game in about 2 to 3 years. And it was a remaster, which is nothing crazy. But then right after that, we had Gears 4. Then we had Gears 5. And it's like, okay, over the same time frame, a studio that was built from the ground up was able to release 3 games in the same lifespan, roughly, that the initiative has existed in. The initiative has really no excuse for not putting out at least one game. Like a bare minimum, like, remaster Perfect Dark, or do some other project as your kickstart. Like, oh yeah, this is a good project to rally the team behind. And I mean, like, I could be wrong, and it could just be like, oh, Rod Ferguson is just that good of a studio head, but it just seems like no duh 101 kind of stuff. Like, okay, yeah, you have a brand new studio, give them an easy project to work together on, and then you go into your real project.
I have to admit, though, it is kind of funny that how efficient the Coalition was, and then Rod Ferguson left, and now they've been AFK ever since. That is incredibly telling, too.
Yeah.
I don't like putting too much stock into one person, but leadership does matter. And at this point, I think the leadership and the initiative has to be questioned.
Yeah, no, I'm at the point now because, like, if anybody had to show something to prove to me they weren't dead in the water this year, it's the initiative. And if they're not even like they like just got started, I mean, dev cycles aren't 2 years, guys. 2 to 3 years is optimistic. Like that's assuming there's no problems. And yeah, COVID did happen, but I mean, at a certain point, we got to stop using that as an excuse. Like, they had 2 years prior to that to work on something. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't give them a pass for that. So like I said, I'm very skeptical of them. Personally, I'm at the point where I think you just scrap the whole team, fire all the heads, put them to work at a studio that actually knows how to get stuff done, and make them work with Obsidian. Let them do that. I think that'd be perfectly fine. Like, Obsidian needs people, and they need people who like workhorses, and let them do that. Like, Obsidian's proven themselves time and time again. They're pumping out games left and right. They could use some polish on a lot of this stuff, so let them work there. Let them do that. Give them to somebody who's actually using it. So I'm just at that point with the initiative. I'm done with them. I mean, I'd love for them to prove me wrong. I'd love for them to come out and be like, all right, here's our title. Here's what we got. And this is going to blow, like, knock your socks off. But, like, I don't care about Perfect Dark in the first place. So you can't get me with nostalgia bait. Like, it's not going to do anything for me. I don't care. I just want to see a good game. And I know we're armchair developers, like, in this case. And I'm just at the point now where I'm like, look, you lost me. I'm not excited for your stuff anymore. You're gonna have to be like, you have to show me something, shadow drop it, do something, but like, you're not going to get me excited now. Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with you there. And like, there's studios I give a break to. Like, for example, like State of Decay 3 is one where I'm kind of okay with where they're at because it's clear that they're fleshing things out. Like, they've built a new support studio. They are the game specifically being made in Unreal Engine 5, so I'm sure they had to
And they
transition
actually have
stuff.
the game out too. That helps too.
Yeah.
So
Well, and they're constantly updating. Like, they just revamped a bunch of the systems in State of Decay too. So if you're a State of Decay fan, there's tons of State of Decay content for you to consume right now still. Like, they still have weekly dev blogs and everything else. They are constantly communicating the state of the game they have, and we'll hear more about State of Decay 3 when it gets there. But like with the initiative, we have a CGI trailer and nothing else. And it wasn't even a CGI trailer. It was just like, it might as well have been a static image. Like, we've seen as much of the initiative's game, or Perfect Dark, as we have of Metroid Prime 4.
same thing. Again, I just don't give any more sympathy anymore. Like, I gave everybody a pass for a lot of COVID stuff. And like, I remember talking to Sam about it. I was like, I give everybody a year. Get 1 year, then you're back on track. Now I'm like, I was too generous with that one personally, but
Well, let's put it this way. If it's 2023 and you're still saying the reason you don't have your game out is COVID, I don't believe you.
yeah,
It
wasn't COVID anymore.
It goes along with Remedy being like, oh, by not making physical copies, we can polish Alan Wake 2 more. Shut up. Just say you don't want to make physical copies because it costs money. Like, just be real with everyone.
Yep. Let's see what else. I wrote down a couple of things. Let's see. But yeah, no. I think the only thing we really hadn't talked about is Yakuza Phil. So he was grilled on day 2 of this deposition. Like it was, they were asking him questions left and right. And I think this is probably going to be I wouldn't say the crux of the argument, but the worst part for the FTC specifically. Because let's talk about the FTC for a second. This is their Hail Mary. Like, they have to get this in order to stop Microsoft. Because the next step after this is that if they don't get this deal done, if they don't get the preliminary injunction, all they can do at that point is waste taxpayer money trying to go to court with them. But at that point, it's after the fact. And if you can't get a preliminary injunction in the first place, that tells you that your chances of federal court are not good. So, I mean, it has happened before where, like, after a merger's already been done, like, they could go back and, like, force you to divest something. But it's not often, and not for, like, a deal this size. So, it's not a guarantee. And if the FTC just, again, is going to lose in court, and if they get seen losing in court, it's going to make them look bad, and it's not good for them. So I don't think it's in their best interest to keep doing it. But yeah, this is like, they have to do this. This is the end of the line for them. They have to get this preliminary injunction. I don't think they're going to get it. But if there's one thing that we've learned from this particular experience, Nick, is that if anything, if it's possible, it's probable in this case. Like those random outcomes. So
yeah. We'll have to wait and see. I legitimately, I cannot wait till this thing's over.
Yeah, like this has been taking a while, and it's just it'd be nice for this to finally be shut, at least for a while here. So what I was getting at is like the FTC like just pushed way too hard to the point people were like actively questioning. They were like, "So Phil, are you gonna put Call of Duty on PlayStation?" It's like, yeah. And it's like, but would you commit to 10 years or more? He's like, yeah. It's like it's my goal that Call of Duty stays on PlayStation. Like as long as PlayStation's willing to do it, and like just make it abundantly clear, like as long as they're down for it, we're in. Like our model wants you to have Call of Duty on PlayStation. And so then it was like you could tell they weren't expecting this. They weren't expecting him just to answer just outright. It's almost like they didn't pay attention to anything anyone's actually been saying this entire time. And it's just like we all knew he was going to say that, but it's like they weren't expecting him to. And then they were like, "Oh, would you put it on cloud?" And like, yeah. It's like, "Oh well, what about other Activision games? What about Diablo? Would you put Diablo on there?" It's like, and then to the point where the judge intervened, it was like, "Stop! Like this is really stupid. You can't like you're getting to the point now where you're like." They're not going to say like, oh, they're going to definitely put it on there. You're not going to sue them for like, oh, you haven't, like, you promised that you were going to do this. And like, if Sony says like, we'll do it for $1, it's like, no, it's like the deal has to be reasonable. And so Judge Corley stopped them, and it makes them look really stupid that this is what they believed in. So, I mean, there were a lot of little tweets and random shit that they put out there. So it's been interesting. I will say that. But I'll see if I can try to find a couple because I thought these were really interesting. But yeah, go ahead and say something.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is it was like when they were trying to grill Phil Spencer about, well, would you put on this? All I could think of is like talking to my daughter about peanut butter. Yeah, would you put on crackers? Well, yeah. Bread? Yeah. A tortilla? Yeah. No, you'll put, like, my daughter will put peanut butter on anything. Phil Spencer will put Call of Duty on anything. Like, there's no doubts about that. It's like, oh, hey, this thing that makes a boatload of money. Do you want to continue making a boatload of money? Yeah. And like for him to like raise his hand and swear they're never gonna take Call of Duty away, I was like, is this for real happening right now? I'm like, okay, like whatever. Like, I just.
Yeah. It was silly.
It's so wild to watch unbridled capitalism is the reason companies like Sony and Microsoft exist. But they're like, whoa, there's too much capitalism going on here. We need to slow down. Like, I don't know. It's frustrating to me. Like, I understand a lot of people that, cover games and, everything else have been like listening to this stuff in and out and like all this court stuff. And I just sit there and go, man, I wish we could take grocery stores to court for price gouging us and, making it harder for everyone to eat. That's somebody I want. I want to see someone from a big grocery corp take the stand and try to defend, high profit margins and selling eggs for $9. Like
See, that's interesting that you bring that up, actually. So, this is something like because someone asked me the other day, like actually about a month ago, I want to say about like how do you get a preliminary injunction for a merger? Mm-hmm. Because the thing about a merger is that you have to prove that there's going to be harm involved, either to consumers or other companies or something like that. So, like. When they were trying to do the preliminary injunction, it was they had to prove that there was going to be harm to the consumer for this deal going through.
Right.
And they failed proving that. Like they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to prove that Microsoft getting Call of Duty would actually harm anybody. And so one of the discussions that we ended up having was about whether or not, like, what would be a situation where they actually could prove harm. And it's actually, there was a case that happened a couple of years ago. I believe it was in California, not 100% positive, but it was a case where a Walmart, one of those like a neighborhood grocery for a small town, which had driven all the other competition out of the market for groceries because they just weren't able to compete or stay open, wanted to move and leave that location. And so the city sued them saying, hey, no, you can't do that. You want to move, you're moving somewhere else, or you're closing this store, going to a different store. That's going to not only put a bunch of us out of jobs, but there's going to be no groceries. You can't buy food here in our town anymore because you were our only supplier. And so they actually, the court actually granted a preliminary injunction stopping them from leaving. They had to stay open and keep providing that service because it actually would cause harm to that community. And so video games are video games and are not at all required for life at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so them saying that, oh, if Microsoft gets Activision, I can't play the newest Call of Duty on my PlayStation, like even assuming that's what they would do, it wouldn't do anything, guys. It doesn't stop them. Like it doesn't hurt you. You could still play your old Call of Duty on it. You're just complaining because you don't like having to buy another system to play that game. So, but that's not harm. And so that argument, I think, with Judge Corley is going to fail. So at least for harm to the consumer, but now they have to add harm to the market. And I think what this case has proven so far is that the market itself isn't really not going to be harmed by this deal. It might actually be improved. So, because you're going to add a big title available by streaming that people actually play, and it's going to be available on more platforms and more availability in how you play it. I mean, that's not a bad idea. It boosts up a market that's helping out there. So I don't think the FTC has done a good job of establishing that's actually going to hurt the market. I mean, and even if it hurts Sony, that's not a bad thing. That's hurting the biggest competition out there. So maybe. But anyway, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anything else you want to cover?
Nope. That goddamn acquisition took up an hour and a half, and then we got more of this nonsense tomorrow.
Hopefully it's done by this week. I pray to God it's done by this week. We may get lucky and it's done by Monday next week, so we can be the first ones to talk about it. So who knows?
Oh wait, yeah, your guys' long weekend's not next weekend, is it?
Nope. Tuesday is off for us. That is 4th of July.
Okay, yeah, we're off the Monday here.
Yeah, no, we're off the Tuesday. So who knows? We'll see how that goes.
But that concludes the ABK podcast. Not at all sponsored at all. But if they want to sponsor us, don't do it. So yeah, any closing thoughts?
Nope. I used all my thoughts on this podcast. I have none left.
No thoughts, only prayers. Yeah, so that's the show. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a like. Help us, combat the ever-evolving algorithm as, Twitter continues to beat my links into submission by only letting, 0.2% of my followers see my tweets when I tweet links. But if I tweet a freaking thing with a GIF, everybody sees it. So it's nonsense. I'm being suppressed. I'm getting suppressed by Elon, and it sucks. But
how dare you? How dare the South African brother go after another South African brother?
We're not doing this on this podcast. The Too Many Chiefs comment is already gonna sink me.
Oh, dude, you're already done.
Oh it's yeah, I'm toast. Hey, I'm not as toast as Cliffy B is, though.
Ooh, we're not gonna talk about it.
Now we know why his last game was called Lawbreakers. Da-da-da-da-da-da. All right. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you guys next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if we don't get sued for libel. Bye for now.